I am Suman Sethi. I'm a principal consultant with InspireOne. Have been working in the space of OD and specifically OD with respect to customer-centric cultures. So I'll be sharing with you whatever was the objective that I stated. I'll be sharing information with you basis our own experience in this area. So we'll try and limit the theoretical and conceptual part to a great extent and talk about actual experiences and examples that we have encountered while we worked in this space. So moving on. Yeah, so I think like to very quickly talk about the question and answer protocol that we want to follow over here. If it is okay with all the participants, I will go through the webinar. I will go through whatever information we need to share, and post that we'll open it up for questions for about 10 minutes. In the case there are some questions that do not get answered within this time frame, we'll certainly get back to you offline and provide all those answers. We have also decided to do a follow-up seminar on this, which will go more in depth into the process of creating a customer-centric culture. So we'll also give you the details on that. So let's now that the administrative piece is over, let's move on. Just a very quick introduction on InspireOne. Some of you may already know us, but for the others who are witnessing our work for the first time, InspireOne represents 3 global brands in India. The first one is IBM, who we represent in India largely for leadership assessment and development solutions. So which really means creating, customizing very specific leadership development journeys which are across levels. Which could be used for succession planning, which could be used for building leadership pipelines, etc. The second global partner we represent in India is TAC. TAC is known in the area of sales development. We work in the entire spectrum of sales development, from basic sales training to key accounts to channel sales to even creating sales academies for organizations. And then finally TMI, who, as most of you would know, is the global leader in partnering with organizations for building performance-related and service customer-centric cultures. So the piece that we are talking about today relates to the work that TMI does. In order to achieve the objective that I had stated right at the outset, we will be covering primarily these areas. So very quickly I'll touch upon the piece on why customer-centric organizations. I don't think we need to belabor that point too much. It's like preaching to the choir. I think the fact that people are talking about it today bases the kind of needs that we get from organizations today, bases I'm sure all your experiences and all your strategy. This is a pretty well-established case, but we'll still spend a little time on this. Moving on, we'll talk about our approach for how we approach creating customer-centric cultures. We'll like to spend some time on critical success factors, because these sometimes get neglected, and an organization may plan and implement and invest a great deal in designing an intervention, but some of the critical success factors often get missed, which may be the reason for why some of these initiatives don't succeed in the long run. And then, like I said, I'll share with you a brief overview of the process, which we will then cover much more in detail in the next stage of the webinar. The cases I intend to take on while we are doing the rest of it, rather than doing cases at the end, because I think cases is what will make this more empirical and not so theoretical. So I will keep using examples throughout the webinar. So let's look at the first piece on why customer-centric organizations. And like I said, I don't want to preach to the choir, but just want to restate the point that there is enough and more research that very clearly brings out that for some time now and for a long time to come in future, competitive advantage will largely depend on how intimate can organizations get with their customers. Product leadership, operational excellence, all are very easily replicable, as we all know, in all industries. Even in the service industry, these are pretty replicable. We've had enough and more experiences in airline and hospitality where we've witnessed that competitors catch up with each other in terms of the product features and how well they operate their businesses. So therefore the opportunity continuously lies with how intimate can we become with the customer, how much do we know our customer, how proactively are we gauging the evolving needs of the customer, and then how responsive are we to those evolving needs. So it's primarily, if you really look at it, it's primarily about two things. One, is there a fair share of the voice of customer that is coming to us, not just for feedback and not just for responses, but voice of the customer from the point of view of how are his or her expectations from our products changing, how are they evolving. So how proactively are we gathering that, and then two, how responsive are we in meeting those needs, how quickly do we meet those needs. Now when I talk about responsiveness, the moment we say how responsive we are in meeting those needs, we very quickly move into the arena of this being an organizational intervention and not an intervention that can be limited to service departments or service functions. Because how responsive an organization is to the customers is a function of the entire organization being geared up to respond to the organization. The service function is just the face of the organization. It cannot and it must not take on the entire responsibility of responsiveness, and so therefore the culture aspect comes into the entire picture. The other piece I'd like to spend just a minute on this slide is that a lot of this competitive advantage that we are talking about, that we can build by being intimate with the customer, can get a further level of differentiation if we align the experience that we offer to the customer, if we align that to the brand promise that we are committing to the customer. So whatever we are promising to the customer through our advertisements, through our visions, through the slogans that come out in the market, if we are able to design and if we are able to articulate even our customer experiences in alignment with those promises, then there is a definite distinct competitive advantage that we build by doing that. So those are the two key messages over here. How intimate are we with the customer? How are we gathering the voice of the customer? How quickly are we responding to it? And are we also leveraging the opportunity of aligning our brand promise to the service experience that we are offering? Moving on, I think though Mahatma Gandhi is known for a lot of other things and rightly so, but we also believe that in these words, and I think most of you would have read these words sometime in your lives, in work lives or even earlier lives. In these words, he very clearly establishes the one simple fact that we exist because of the customer. So anybody or anything or any process in the organization that is not aligned to that understanding is actually negating the very existence of the customer, or is actually negating the very existence of the business. So if we are talking about why customer-centric cultures, I think very clearly what we are saying is that it's really about customer-centric cultures, because we exist because of the customer. If the customer stops buying from us, there is no existence. So laying that very fundamental case, very often when we go to organizations, and some people sometimes ask us that you talk a lot about shaping customer-centric cultures, but what is the business case for it? And while in the earlier years, we used to spend a lot of time building the business case and trying to communicate the business case, right now, and the way that markets are right now, the question that comes to our mind when we are asked that question is, seriously, do we still need convincing about the business case? Because if any organization is still questioning the business case of why customer-centric cultures, then probably they are not yet ready to embark on this journey. Probably it's not yet really become that relevant to them. And so therefore to us it doesn't even need to be spent time on. It is an established piece. The business case for customer centricity is fairly well established. Let's also look at some of the data points that support this. And again, like I'm saying, I don't want to belabor this point because I think for most of you it's fairly clear. I think when organizations are mostly looking at So when organizations are mostly looking at customers and how our customer share is improving, very often they only look at one dimension of how many customers are we adding on, and which is a really good data point to look at, which is a really good data point to work towards, which is a great thing to motivate and encourage our people with, that these are the number of new customers that we've got. But at the same time, if we also don't focus on the other data point of how many are we losing, then we are actually losing out the entire picture, the complete picture. Because what we are only looking at is how many are we adding, we are not looking at how many we are losing, and more importantly, why are we losing those. And that can provide a very critical data point on where does our customer service strategy need to be directed, because the reasons for why customers lose us is the direction in which we should be aiming whatever customer strategy that we have. Also, I think most of you would know that it costs at least 7 times more to win a new customer than to keep an existing one. And I think the business case over there is fairly clear. There is enough and more empirical data and research available on the fact that service recovery or keeping existing customers happy is far more profitable than all the time attempting to get new customers. And that's why the business case for building a culture which will ensure that customers who come to us stay with us and stay with us for life. Moving on, there is some more research that has happened, that has been done by Mercer, where they say that the moments of truth that greatly impact customer perception either positively or negatively are the ones that where the human contact is a little bit more than the ones that we deal with technology. So for instance, if you look at situations of opening accounts. So this study was done more from the point of view of the financial industry, but it is also true for others. You look at the moment of truth of opening an interaction with a customer, so whether it's opening an account or whether it's beginning business with a customer, or you look at the moment of truth of a problem resolution, the maximum impact that can be created on customer perception is in these situations. And in both these situations, if you see, the human contact is obviously higher than the technology contact. Now when we're talking about human contact being of great importance to the whole customer perception piece, and then thereby the customer loyalty piece, the only way to make this human contact consistent or sustainable over a period of time is if the organization is culturally equipped to sustain it. This cannot happen by just systems and processes being worked at. This cannot happen by just automating things or getting in technology. This needs continuous, relentless, sustainable efforts which are made culturally to ensure that the final experience that the customer is getting is of the type that we would like it to get. Furthermore, of course, there are surveys which talk about when a customer is happy, he talks to about 8 people. When he's unhappy, he talks to about 22 people, and then the multiplier effect all of us know about. So that whole and especially in today's time with the social media coming in, these numbers only get extrapolated within seconds. So the whole piece on why customer-centric organizations, I think, is pretty irrefutable. We need to do it. We need to be close to our customer. We need to understand the customer. We need to be responsive to the customer. So therefore, let's look at the approach of how can this be created? How can cultures be created? What is the framework that we use to create these cultures? So let's first also, establish the definition of what is customer centricity. So everybody is talking about it, but a lot of people understand it differently. So some people would understand it more in terms of, come to our organizations and, we have all this frontline staff. Please train them and please change their mindsets and, make them really customer attuned and make them really customer friendly, and that's how we will achieve customer centricity. The problem lies with my frontliners. A lot of times, people will, organizations will call us and say that, I have my frontliners pretty much organized, but, there are some people in the back end, some back end functions who don't really understand the impact of their role on the customer's experience. So please come and train them, and thereby we will have customer centricity. I think it's important to understand customer centricity is far more and beyond just training people at certain levels. First and foremost, customer centricity, as stated by most experts in this area, is simply about placing the customer in the center of all decisions. When I say all decisions, I mean all decisions at all levels. So whether these are strategic initiatives, whether these are decisions that are to do with what kind of systems and processes we should have, whether these are decisions in terms of what kind of people we should be hiring, whether these are decisions in terms of the day-to-day tactical issues that come up with customers. Whatever the decisions are, the customer has to be the center of all the decisions that we are taking. The other aspect of customer centricity is also that people across levels and functions are able to, like I said earlier, anticipate customer needs and then respond to them accordingly. The goal that most organizations therefore look at is to be a leader in customer centricity. You need to, at the bare minimum, have these two in place. A lot of times when we also propose approaches to organizations, we feel it's important for them to understand all types of nuances of what a customer-centric organization is characterized by. And the more we have worked in this area, the more clearly we've been able to elucidate and explain and align with companies on what are the various characteristics of a customer-centric organization. First and foremost, customer centricity has to be a shared value across departments. So customer centricity cannot be only owned by or cannot only reside with the service function. What this means is that any performance indicators that are to do with the customer have to lie with all the departments, because all departments, all functions, in whatever they do, in some way or the other impact that KPI. So service and measures related to service cannot only rest with the service function. They have to rest with all functions. Just to give you a small example over here, we recently worked with an organization where we started work with the service delivery function, and we equipped them with certain skills that they needed, certain mindsets that they needed to perform the role that was being expected of them. But very quickly, while we did the diagnostics, we realized that that is not that's not what's going to change the picture for this organization. The bottlenecks actually were with the other functions who did not believe that they had any role to play in customer centricity. And at the end of the diagnostics and the end of the initiative that we did with them, it actually led us into working with that organization on creating service related KPIs for all their functions, and just making that change, just making the change on saying that okay, all functions now will be measured on service parameters, it just became a game changer, because the way each department, each role was looking at what they have to deliver completely changed, because now they were being measured on something else, not just on how well they followed their processes or things like that, but actually on what kind of an impact have they created on whoever their customer is, internal or external. Secondly, like I said, the customer becomes the focal point for all decisions. The third characteristic, and one of the more critical ones, is that the leadership team has to display all the signals in alignment with the customer-centric way of working. So for instance, you cannot say that come and train my people, my frontliners and my middle management need to understand how important the customer is. Please come train them, please work with them, create change champions. But then in a review meeting, when you're having your regular business review meeting, service doesn't get reviewed. The first 2 or 3 parameters are to do with numbers or revenues or processes, and service doesn't feature there. it's not going to work for a very long time, because people will spend time and effort and focus on areas that they believe are going to be reviewed. So that's only just one signal that the leadership team has to display. In addition to that, there are many more powerful signals which we'll address in a bit. Again, ensuring centricity, customer centricity is owned by all departments. And finally, it needs to also come down to each person understanding how he or she will display customer-centric behaviors. So now it's not important to say that we are a customer-centric organization because we want to be responsive, we want to empathize with the customer, and we want to be really friendly with the customer. It needs to translate into very granular behaviors for each person in the company. So what is the person who's sitting in the billing department of a telecom company, for instance, what are the behaviors that are expected of him for him to be displaying customer centricity? So how is he going to be talking to his internal customers? How is he going to be responding to his internal customers? He needs to understand that in terms of day-to-day behaviors. Only then customer centricity becomes a way of life. And then finally we say that, okay, yes, systems and processes also need to become customer centric. This list is not necessarily in order of priority, but we do believe that a lot of work needs to happen in terms of what is getting measured, how are leaders aligned to customer centricity, how well do all functions understand that they have a role to play, how well equipped is each person in the organization to display certain behaviors. And then we also need to look at the systems and processes, because if we have the first part in place, then even if there are slight gaps in systems and processes, people will take care of that, because people are aligned, people understand why they need to do a certain thing. So that's the cultural context of it. If you have people who are aligned to it, then your systems and processes will get taken care of. Moving on, the framework that we use for creating a customer-centric culture. So if those were all the characteristics of what a customer-centric organization is, what is a framework that will help us achieve that? So at TMI, we believe that any organization that wants to undergo a change and create a culture which orients itself to the customer needs to look at all these 5 elements in tandem and in alignment with whatever change we want to create. So if we want that change to be sustainable, the diagnostics as well as the solutioning has to happen across these 5 boxes. So let me take another example over here. Very often we would be, like I said earlier, we would be called to say, come and train our customer service people. So give them the right skills and give them the right mindset and so on, and we'll be good to go. Which is really good, because you need to train those people. It's not as if you can do very much without those people being aligned to customer-centric behaviors. However, if that is the only focus, then the impact of that would be short-lived. So we'll train those people, we'll do a great job of it. They'll feel motivated. They would want to be great service providers. They'll go back with a lot of energy to their workplaces. But in the absence of other things happening, their energy is not going to be sustainable over a long period of time. So let's see how that really translates in the workplace. So for instance, we've trained these people on service mindsets and skills, and they've gone back with a lot of energy. Now when they go back to their workplaces for a week or so, they use all the right behaviors and skills, and very soon they start noticing other things in the environment which are not quite in alignment with what they have been asked to do. So for example, they have a customer issue and the customer wants to escalate it to the manager, and they go to their leader with that issue, and the leader asks them questions like, is this a really high worth customer? And if the answer is no, and the leader brushes it off by saying that, why are we wasting our time on that? Let it be, move on, or refuse whatever the customer is asking for. Or if the leader is saying that, I don't have the time for these issues that you're bringing up because I need to submit a report somewhere and I have a really critical meeting to go for, the signals that their managers are giving them is that they are not available and this is not important. Very often, if you would be calling, call centers of various types of organizations and you ask to speak to the manager, you're very often given a response that the manager is busy. You know very clearly over there what is the kind of signaling that's happening by the leadership team. Now, the moment the person who is who is facing the customer gets encountered with these behaviors from his leader, the message that he gets clearly is, oh, this is not important. It was just a workshop to make me feel motivated, but this clearly is not important for my organization, so I don't need to, waste my time over it. Let me just get back to what I was doing earlier. The second way that it impacts it is, if you're not structured to respond to customer complaints and customer issues in the fastest possible way, again the skills are going to have a limited impact, because the same person goes back, seeks a decision for a customer related issue or a customer related concern, and the structure is so unwieldy that it goes from one table to the other table, and there's an email trail mail that is created. Again, we are not structured to be customer oriented. This guy is not going to be able to spend, he's not going to be willing to spend too much effort on it going forward. Similarly, if he encounters systems and processes which are not customer friendly, so he's being told in his workshop that please be responsive and you must respond to all customer complaints immediately or customer concerns immediately, but the process says the SLA is 5 working days or 7 working days. That's not a very responsive process. And he comes back and he realizes, okay, my environment is not geared to provide that experience to the customer. There is only that much I can do, and there is only that much that he will do also for a limited period of time. Similarly, if he is not being acknowledged or recognized for customer-centric behaviors, which is also a very powerful signal that the person is really extending himself and really creating great experiences for the customer, but nobody in the system is acknowledging his efforts, nobody in the system is rewarding him for that effort. Again, the signal to him is, this is not important, so let me not waste my time and energy over it. And so then therefore whatever investment the organization made on training these people will have limited returns, as we can see. Which is not to say that if you do the other boxes, if you just do the signals it will work, or if you just work on the structure it will work. The idea or the objective over here is that everything needs to be aligned to whatever you want to achieve. So if your shared values say that we want to be a customer responsive, customer centric organization, then all the other 4 boxes have to align with whatever that shared value is. The way that it comes to life specifically for creating a service culture or a customer-centric culture is, these are some of the things which will be very, very specific to a culture like that. So in terms of shared value, you need to have a very clear clear vision and mission on what do you want to achieve at the end of it. So what should change at the end of it? Why are we doing it? How will our business get impacted? The business imperative has to be very clearly stated to your organization that when we do this, these are the kind of returns that we are looking at. Once that compelling statement has been made, then the rest of the 4 boxes get aligned to saying, okay, so how will we make this happen? Which then means that in terms of signals, very clearly articulating what do we want the top management to be doing in line with customer centricity. So what are the behaviors that they need to be displaying? What are the reviews that they need to be doing? How do they need to be coaching people? How do they need to be coached themselves? Then we talk about creating a service-oriented culture, which means that all functions must have a very clear line of sight to the customer. So how does each person's work or role in each function impact the customer experience must be very clear to them. What are the customer-centric behaviors that we are looking should be displayed internally as well as externally to customers? What are the policies that will reinforce customer centricity? So, whether it's your reward policies, whether it is your hiring policies. For instance, if you want a customer-centric culture, you need to hire certain kind of people who are oriented towards the customer, who are naturally oriented towards the customer. Is your hiring policy aligned to that? Is your performance management aligned to that, and so on and so forth. In fact, one of the there are signals that can be given in so many ways. How often is customer centricity, for instance, being spoken about by the leaders in external and internal forums? So do town halls first talk about the customer and what we have done for the customer, or do they first talk about our performance and the numbers? The interviews that leaders give to the media, or the conferences that the leaders attend externally, how much are they focusing on the customer in all of those? Let me give you a couple of examples. We did some work with Oberoi Hotels some years back, and when we met with Mr. Oberoi, one of the things that we asked him was that there is a very, very solid customer oriented, very well entrenched culture that exists in that organization. And one of the first questions that we asked him is that what do you do to make it happen? So what is your mandate to everybody, to your GMs? And he said that a very, very clear mandate is that the GM is like an innkeeper. Like there were innkeepers in olden days who owned their inns. So he says that we say that all GMs are like innkeepers. And what did innkeepers do? If they had a full day of work, what kind of things did the innkeepers spend their time on mostly? And he said that just by looking at that, a very clear mandate to all our GMs is that 60% of their time has to be spent with customers, not in internal meetings, not going around and inspecting the hotel and what is happening and so on and so forth, but 60% of their time has to be spent with customers in various ways. So whether they are on the floor in the lobby interacting with customers, whether they are looking at customer complaints that have come up and are solving for that, whatever it may be, 60% of their time has to go with customers. That's a clear mandate, and that's a huge signal to the rest of the organization. He went on to say that whenever he visits various properties, if he's visiting for a day, he says 60% of the day is spent with the customers in that property. So and it's clear and it's visible and people know where the focus is. Another example of a very powerful signal, leadership signal, is an insurance organization which after this whole regulatory upheaval happened, one of the things that we found out while we were working with them is that we shadowed a lot of their business meetings. We shadowed the top 5 or 6 leaders. We just kind of shadowed them for 2 days each. And one of the things that we realized was that there were just very limited customer related discussions that were happening. The customer did not feature in most of the discussions that they were having. And that and of course the regulatory requirements led that organization to then actually mandate the time that all leaders needed to spend in the market, something called customer immersion process for leaders. A huge signal again. Another organization by way of signal said that we believe the customer is the center of everything that we do, and so much so that we will have one member on the board who is going to be the voice of the customer. His role will clearly be at all times to bring the focus of the board back to customer and customer related issues. So you have like a representative of the customer sitting at the board level. That's a huge signal. So that's what we mean by signals. And the importance of signals is that that's what shows the rest of the organization how critical this is. Moving on, then of course we have skills. So of course at the primary level there would be equipping people with all customer centric behaviors, attitudes and skills. Also training managers on how to coach for customer centricity on an ongoing basis, because an external partner can only be with you for a period of time, and if the culture is going to depend on what the external partner does, then it's not actually a very sustainable culture, because whenever the partner moves away, the culture kind of falls by the wayside. So the idea of the work that we do with organizations, specifically in the skill building area, is apart from building customer centric behaviors, we actually believe a great deal in creating champions within the organization who are then trained by us on how to sustain this and have the internal capability to take it on for posterity. So building that kind of a structure, and then of course we have service leadership competencies, etc. Going on to the structure, I think there are two or three critical things in the structure. One, that if customer is the center, then there have to be cross-functional self-managed work groups that are only focusing on ensuring that customer responsiveness is of the highest level and time is not being taken on decision making. Similarly, empowerment, because the most damage that happens to a customer relationship is when the people that the customer is dealing with are not able to at the first instance resolve his or her issue. If for 80% of the cases that person who's dealing with the customer has to go back to someone else and get a decision, it's the hugest loss of opportunity over there. So therefore, how are we empowering people? And of course we understand that if you empower people, you also need to have a certain quality of people, and that's the reason for why the way that you hire also becomes very critical. So you hire the right kind of resources, you empower them in the right kind of way, you make sure that at least 80% of the customers' issues, requirements are dealt with at the first level and don't need to be escalated. And then the third piece that I spoke about was creating a champions organization within the organization who will be the flag bearers, the conscience keepers, the people who will really ensure that things are working on the ground. And finally, coming to the systems box, ensuring that all kinds of service level agreements amongst internal customers and internal suppliers and to the final customer are aligned to whatever vision we want to make. Similarly, we are saying that we align our recruitment, our performance management, and everything to what we want to measure and what we want to deploy in the organization. Now, as you can see, since it's a cultural initiative and since it requires an organization-wide intervention, it also needs to be taken up in phases which are palatable, which are something that the organization can deal with. Because if you open up the entire Pandora's box and try and attack it together, it's going to be virtually impossible, because there is also business as usual that needs to be looked at. So therefore, what we recommend is some phases that should be used in order to ensure that the deployment happens in an organized way and is also palatable to most organizations. The first one, of course, will begin with the organizational diagnostics, which will happen across the 5 boxes that I spoke about. So we would understand what is the current state. We would also establish what is the desired state. So along with the leadership team, establish where do we want to reach, how will we know we've reached there, what are the measures, and so on and so forth, and then go ahead and do a complete diagnostics to see where we are at vis-a-vis all the 5 boxes. Identify the critical success factors and also create the roadmap for what needs to be delivered as a solution, which is the second phase, which is about planning and implementation, which begins by creating a complete steering group and a project team, which talks about doing workshops, which talks about how are we going to identify and train change agents, what is the internal communication strategy going to be, how are reward and recognition going to be designed in alignment with what we want to do. And finally, the sustenance phase is the phase where we talk about, as a result of the diagnostics, if certain improvement projects have come up where we have said that certain systems or processes or structures need to change or get aligned to ensure that everything that is being done is sustainable, then those are the improvement projects that can be taken up at that phase. Now, these are not cast in stone, so some organizations which are smaller may do all of these really quickly and may do a couple of phases simultaneously, but in some cases where the spread is wider, they may want to take it on in a phased manner. So if you really look at how this gets implemented, or what is the role that various people or stakeholders play in the organization, so whatever is the desired change has to be led by the senior team. So the entire piece of the signals, it needs to be continuously energized by champions, so the champion structure that gets created, and it needs to be delivered by everyone, which is really the implementation projects that happen. And then there is, of course, a very clearly laid down, profile of a change champion. How will a change champion be selected? How will he or she be trained? What will be the role that they will play, and so on and so forth. And these would always be people from the business who are recognized as role models, who have some kind of influence without authority in the system. Having spoken about the approach in fair amount of detail of what needs to be done to build a shaping customer-centric culture, I'd like to spend some time on the critical success factors that we believe need to be definitely addressed by most organizations. So needless to say, the buy-in and strong visible leadership. So what I mean by this is that a lot of times if the mandate is given to us by the L&D functions, the first question that we ask them is this mandate coming from the table of the head of the organization, or is it something that people you are feeling or people are feeling that needs to be done? Is there a clear buy-in from the leadership? The reason for this is that this kind of an intervention, as you would have seen so far, has organizational impact, which means investment that needs to happen is not just in terms of the money that needs to be put in it, but then the larger investment is in terms of the time that people will need to spend on it, the time that the leadership will need to spend on it, the time that it will need for it to become sustainable. And none of this can happen unless the leadership team is completely bought in and is willing to play a very visible role over there. So that's the strong, a lot of times some of our customers ask us, why are you not in the market, selling customer-centric cultures as an offering? Clearly, it is not an offering that can be sold. So we cannot, our business development people or us, we cannot go to an organization and tell them, you must become customer-centric. It is a need that must be felt. The pain of not doing that must be felt by the leadership team for them to want to do it. So it's a felt need. Again, we need to have a very strong internal project team and manager who's working dedicatedly on this. A strong team of champions we've spoken about. We've spoken about internal communication as a strategy, not as emailers that are going in sporadically, but as a strategy, whether it's external communication, internal communication, and then of course measurement parameters and review mechanisms. I think the one critical message on this slide is that if this initiative is taken on as something which is plus to the work that people are already doing, chances are that it will not really see success at the end of the day. People need to see this as their core work. Only then will it be sustainable. Leaders need to see this as this is what they need to be doing instead of some things that they were doing earlier. Champions need to see it as a core part of their roles. People who are delivering on it need to see it as this is the way we have to work now. If at any point in time people start getting the feeling that, oh, I have my day job and in addition to this I have to do this, we know that it's not going to work for very long. In order to ensure implementation and governance, it's important to have a complete governance structure in place where you have leadership team who may be the sponsors for this, you have a project team who are the execution team for this, you have champions and managers and employees all across that are working on it. I'll just spend the last 2 or 3 minutes on giving you an overview of how we go about doing this, and like I said, this is something that in detail can be covered in a subsequent webinar. So we follow what we call the 5I process. The first 2 I's over there are investigation and identification, which are to do with establishing the desired state and also understanding what the current state is, and thereby creating a blueprint for the roadmap. So the whole solution design coming out from these 2 steps. Implementation is of course the implementation of the solution in the way that the leadership team prioritizes to do it. The integration piece is where we build in sustenance mechanisms through change champions, through reviews, through project governance, through changes in structures and systems that need to happen, so that integrates or sustain it. And inspiration is an overarching piece that basically talks about that anything that we are doing where we want people to change culturally, we want to appeal to their hearts and to their minds. So just giving them a very do this and do that kind of an approach is not going to work. We need to connect with people, we need to engage with people, we need to engage the hearts of people for them to feel, yes, this is a compelling case and I need to do this to add value not just to the organization, but it adds value to me also. So that's broadly the 5 steps that we would use. I just want to take a minute over here to talk about some of the work that we have done. So we have worked of course we worked with naturally with service sector organizations, but so we worked with telecom, we worked with financial services, we worked with hospitality, we worked with healthcare to an extent. So we've covered the traditional service industries, but what is really interesting is how much this need is now being felt by the manufacturing industry also, and in the last 2 or 3 years, actually a lot of the work or a lot of the approaches that we've submitted have been to manufacturing organizations. So whether it is manufacturing of medical devices, whether it is manufacturing of consumer healthcare products, whether it is manufacturing of things like consumer durables. But we've got a lot of, whether it's also interest from the tire industry, to build a customer-centric organization. So what is very interesting and very reassuring for us is that I think we are reaching a level in India where most organizations are realizing it doesn't matter what space they are in, it doesn't matter whether they're the traditional service organizations or the non-service organizations. It just doesn't matter which industry you belong to. I think most organizations are very quickly realizing that the customer has to be the center of everything that we do, and therefore we need to build a customer responsive, customer centric culture. To us, that is very indicative of how thoughts are changing, how leaders are willing to take this on, how they're feeling the compelling case to do that. And for us, it will be really interesting, not just in India but also globally, to work with different types of organizations and enable customer centricity over there. So that's broadly what we wanted to share at this point in time for this seminar. Would be open to any questions that you may have. There are a couple of questions that have already come that I will respond to. And in the meantime, the others can feel free to add on their questions. So one of the questions that we often hear, and we've heard organizations also ask, and there is somebody here who's also asked, that is, how long does an intervention like this take? So the answer is that at a minimum 6 to 8 months, if it's a really small organization, and if it's a very it's a discrete, very handleable size of people, a minimum of 6 to 8 months, because any kind of cultural shift that you're looking at, where you're looking at skills, you're looking at signals, you're looking at systems, you're looking at structures, changing all of that and then seeing the impact of it will take a minimum of 6 to 8 months. And if the organization is larger and the mandate that they have taken is larger, it could go up to anything like 18 to 24 months also. And our endeavor in any of these situations is that towards the end of the whatever is the plan of the initiative, we have to spend considerable amount of time in building internal capability for the organization, then to take it on as a way of life. So that's really how much in terms of time that it will take. There's another question on change champions, which is around people already have a lot of work to do and they're already stretched and they're already stressed, and so therefore there is a fear that the change champions role will not get performed, and if that doesn't get performed, how much does it impact the success of this initiative? So our response to that is very simple. If you're looking at making real change, if you're looking at making sustainable change, and if the organization is serious about it, then the change champion's role has to become the core role for that person. Then he cannot be expected to perform his day job and also do this. Then a part of his day job should actually be this. So in any initiative where you really want that change to happen successfully and quickly and fluidly, we recommend that at least 50 to 60% of the change agent's goals, and therefore his role and therefore his time, should actually be going in making this change happen. If an organization is not able to do that, we do not believe it's going to be a very sustainable change in any case, because everybody is seeing it as an add-on. It doesn't go down very well with being a cultural change. So if an organization is getting into it, then change agents need to be into it for at least 50% of their time and their role. There is a question on serving internal customers. Like I spoke about it earlier, if you remember the 5-box model that I had shared, there was a piece under the signals and a piece under skills which spoke about building customer centricity as an internal value. Now what that means really is that all functions, support functions internally, are made to undergo certain workouts, and in those workouts the objective is for them to be able to identify who is their customer, who is their internal customer, and how does their work with their internal customers impact the final customer experience. So these workouts are actually designed for them to be able to see what is the entire value delivery chain to the customer from this organization's point of view. What are the various things that the external customer wants from this company, and where does their role fit in that service delivery chain. So which part of the service delivery chain are they, and therefore who is their internal customer, and therefore what are the expectations that the internal customer has from them, and therefore in order for them to fulfill those customers' requirements, what should their behaviors be, what should their service level agreements be, what do they need to change in the way that they are working currently. And then of course, you need to build customer centricity or customer related KPIs for everybody in the back end. Only then will they, do they start taking this seriously. So therefore there is intervention that needs to happen at the measurement level, at the orientation level, and actually at the work level and the roles that they have. So I think currently we have time enough only for these questions, but like I said earlier, if any of you have any other questions, please do feel free to reach out to us and we will respond to them online. And I do hope that this provided some kind of value and some kind of insight to this whole piece on shaping customer-centric culture, and we look forward immensely to having more discussions with some of you if you would so desire. Thank you very much for your patience and your attendance today.